Hi everyone, Keith Lackner. I've had enough interest on Facebook and Instagram to show people how I do thread chasing. Now here's a perfect example of a piece that I would normally turn. This is going to be a pet urn. So we've got the base, it's all hollowed out. We've got the top right here that's ready for us to cut in our threads. And I'm going to show you guys everything that I do. Now this is kind of a hybrid version that I've kind of come up with on my own a little bit. I had the great opportunity to learn thread chasing from Mike Mahoney. I was at the David Mark School and Mike taught us how to do thread chasing. And then a little while after that I found a video online that had Alan Batty. Now Alan is just a giant in the industry and he's got a video showing thread chasing. So I took a lot of what Mike taught me and a little bit of what Alan taught me and kind of combined them together to come up with my own style of thread chasing. So in this video I'm going to show you how to thread chase, the tools that you will need, and actually how to make your own threads. It's very important, I think, as a craftsman to actually make your own threads instead of buying little inserts or, you cut off PVC pipe that's got the threads in it. But this way, it actually just shows the person that you're giving this to that you're actually a skilled craftsman. Okay, so here's the tools that we're going to need for today's class. We're going to need, the most important thing is a thread chaser. Now these are actually sold in sets. So it's very important that if you buy a set, make sure that you keep them together. This is actually a really great tool. I bought it a few years ago from the Carter & Sons company, and this is actually a Mike Mahoney signature. This one is actually great. I like it. You've got both male and female on the same tool. And there's a ball in the center because when you start thread chasing, you actually use more of your finger right here than actually anything else. And it's going to make sense. You're going to be doing little circles, and this ball really helps you with better control. And this way, you're not, you don't have multiple tools. You only have one tool that you got to find, and it's this one right here. Okay, we're going to need a toothbrush. Toothbrush is just nothing more than just cleaning, so we're going to use it for that. Number 2 pencil. This is actually going to be used not for writing with, and I'll show you the trick behind that. And then we also have a black Sharpie, a set of calipers. Now we have a point tool. A lot of people out there don't know what this is. Every place I go to teach, they're amazed by this tool every time I bring it. If you don't have one, please add one to your lineup of tools. You're not going to regret it. We're going to need a parting tool. And then I also like, which is optional, you don't have to have, a beading parting tool. This one's just a lot thicker. It's a lot easier to drive it in to keep a straight line. So these are the tools that we're going to need. Okay, so what we're going to start out with here is we're going to start out with the actual base. So we're going to be cutting the female thread first. This piece is completely hollowed out. It's very important that you actually finish turn your piece before you even start thinking about setting your threads. Once you set your threads, you cannot go back in here at all. You're going to destroy and tear out your threads. So it's very important. This piece is done. The outside is turned. It's all sanded. It's ready to go. The inside is as well. As you can see, it's hollow all the way down. And I'm ready to cut my threads in. This is going to be the last step to this. So let's cut it into the threads. Okay, so now here's the trick I told you with a pencil. This pencil actually, make sure you get a number 2 that's got the straight lines cut on it, because what we need to do is make sure that the opening that we cut here first is actually a straight parallel 90-degree line. We don't want it cocked in this way or cocked in that way, because as we start turning our the male part in, it's either going to free up and not have a thread, or it's going to bind itself up. So this has to be a true 90 right here. And the easiest way to find that out is just set this down. Right now you can see it's not even close. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my parting tool, I'm going to scribe a line, and I'm just going to cut straight in. Alright, so now we've got a parallel surface right here. The next thing we need to do is we actually need to make sure that this top part is flat. Actually, I like to have just a little bit of a concave in there, so when the lid comes down, there's not going to be any gap right there. I actually want it to seal on the very outer rim all the way around. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're actually going to cut the radius, because if I try to come in here and start, it won't let me start because I'm at a hard 90. So I need to soften this edge up. So that's the very first step. So there we are, we got a nice radius right here. That's actually gonna help this tool be able to present itself and actually start cutting. See how I'm actually now able to go across the face of it? We're gonna start out on the side. We're not gonna come in straight here. First we need to establish the first tooth, and it's easier to come in on an angle right here. And actually what we're gonna do is we're not gonna use the lead edge until we're almost got a good defined, maybe 2 or 3 threads into this thing before we actually start cutting with the lead edge. First off, all we're gonna do is cut with the middle. The next thing to do is we actually have to set our thread chasing speeds. Now this is where it gets a little complicated. I really can't tell you. I could give you a range, and that range is probably about 350 to about 500 RPMs. Another good trick is if you have a lathe that actually doesn't have a digital readout, a thing you could do is actually look on either your threads on your front or your back of your lathe, and once you actually start seeing those threads moving, you know it's a good speed to where you can actually cut your own threads in. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to bring this way down, about 450 RPMs right now. So all I'm going to do is just come across here, make sure I'm center. I'm not center, I need to come up just a little bit. Okay, one thing is very important when you're cutting the female thread is you've got to make sure that you're actually closer to about 500 RPMs. If you're spinning too slow, what could happen is as you're starting to come down, it's going so slow, it's going to get lost, and you're actually going to come back about a half a thread, and you're going to go further in. What that's called is a drunken thread. So it's halfway down, then all of a sudden it skips, so it almost looks like your thread is intertwined like that. And that's a drunken thread, and that's only really because you lost contact, and more than likely you lost contact was because you were going too slow in your RPMs. So here we go. It's just this simple. We're gonna grab the tool, finger out, and all we're gonna do is just make a circle. Make a bunch of practice little circles first. And when we're confident with that circle, we're gonna let it touch. And it's a little bit at a time. Little bit goes a long way. You cannot rush thread chasing. Okay, so let's stop it. Look at it. That's good. I've got about a thread and a half that I can see, and all it is just lightly scratched. And that's all we want. We want to actually just establish that thread first. And as we're coming, you're going to watch me, I'm going to start to swing around. And I'm still cutting with the middle. I'm not allowing that lead edge, that lead cut tooth in yet. I'm going to wait till I'm about halfway down, then I'm going to start cutting and introducing my lead tooth. The reason for that is if I start using that lead tooth too soon, it's actually going to put too much stress on these threads that are riding behind it. I call those the driver threads. So if you introduce your cut tooth too soon to it, what all you're going to do is just blow out the threads. It's putting too much stress, and it's just going to crumble these that are sitting behind it. So practice our circles first. Still cutting with the middle. See, I'm coming around. Now I've introduced the lead tooth. Now all we're doing is going for depth. Okay, so now let's just run it around our toothbrush. Just clean up. All we're doing is just getting everything out of the threads. Now you see we got some really good defined threads in there. Now the last thing that I'm going to do on this is I'm going to come back up to turning speeds, and all I'm going to do is just cut in just a little chamfer right there. All that does is just ease it, so when the male thread comes in, it's just a lot easier to start that thread. And that is it. And that's cutting the female. Now let's cut the male. Okay, so now we're ready to cut in the male threads. The most important thing to do is to actually figure out how the diameter of your male threads need to be able to fit in here. You don't want a lot of rocking around, and the last thing you want to do is set it in there and it drops all the way through. We want to actually be able to grab those threads and get it a good tight fit, especially seeing that these are urns. So what we're going to do is actually, we're going to take our caliper and we're going to just measure what this dimension is right here. This is actually the high spot of the thread. So when we translate it over, it's actually going to translate over to the lowest spot. So this is actually what we need to mark on this piece. Okay, so as you can see, we're ready to start our threads. We've got this step right here that we painted black. The reason we painted that black is this part right here is going to represent the lowest part of our thread. So as we're cutting our threads in, once we see a witness line across this, we know we're deep enough. And we know that it's going to spin on perfect. So if we make our threads and we're still too far away and we don't have that witness line that's scratched in there, we know that the threads will not fit. The diameter is going to be too large. So all we would do is just knock them back a little bit and just keep going making our threads once we relieve that witness line. And then once we have that done, we're just going to turn that part away and we should have a good fit. One last thing that we need to do, just like with the female thread, when we're cutting the male thread, we've got a 90-degree right here. We cannot come up and start the thread. It can't happen. So what we need to do is we actually need to round this off so that we could start over here and then we're going to finish up straight. Last thing we need to do is we actually need to create a release or an exit. So what's going to happen is if we're cutting and we don't have a release and we need to make this thread all the way up, what's going to happen? We're going to hit the lid and we're just going to cut vertical lines all the way around it. We're going to lose that spiral cut that we put into it. So we've got to make a release or a relief right about there so that as we're cutting our thread, we could exit before we hit right here. That's another great thing about this tool that separates them from the rest, is this radius that's right there. If you wondered what that is, it allows you to actually get deep. So the perfect tool for this is actually the point tool. If you don't have a point tool to get in there, you're going to need one. But if not, another good tool is a carbide tip diamond. You can get right in there and just knock yourself a relief right out. See, we've got the relief, so as you can see right there, there's where my last thread is, where it's going to be cutting, and I probably have about a good, I don't know, I'd say 1/8 of an inch before I bottom out. So if I bottom the tool out, I'm probably 2 threads into the cutter. Another thing that helps out a little bit of a trick is that we want to dish this just a slight. We don't want this coming straight this way, because as we close the lid, what could happen is that it could actually bottom out before we hit the edge here, and there's going to be a gap. Last thing we want to do is actually see unsightly gaps. So one thing I do is I actually just ever so slightly back cut this as it goes back. That'll actually give us a little bit more room to establish our threads. So now we're ready to cut our threads. This is the tool that we're going to use. We're going to use the male side, and the motion that we're going to do is very similar to the same motion that we did, but instead of doing circles this way, we're going to be doing circles. And as we're doing circles, we're actually rotating it this way as we're coming across. So when we come across, we don't want to actually come straight across. We're actually just knocking it a little bit on an upcut. And what we want to do is actually just establish about a 1/2 thread at a time. I know that I've got a little bit more material here than I need, and that's going to be good because what it's going to do is going to give me a little bit of room just in case if I have a little slip up or if I accidentally bottom out and I cut my thread in. This way I could actually just cut the tops of them off, and I've already got my thread established. So all I got to do is just follow it in and let the lead tooth cut in a little bit deeper each time. So we're gonna bring our turning speeds back down to about 450. And again, we're not starting with the lead tooth. We're cutting probably about 3 teeth back. As you can see, I've already got about a thread and a half. Maybe about a thread and a half, 2 full threads that are just shadowed in. They're not really established yet. I've just got that groove cut into them. And we're just gonna slowly introduce those threads into it, and we're gonna start to slowly work our way back. There we go, we got most of our threads established. Now it's just a part of just letting that lead tooth cut in and actually establish a good thread. Okay, now right there I'm bottomed out. I've got a good established tooth all the way down, but one thing we don't see is we don't have a mark on our witness line. So we know we've got to go deeper. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring our turning speeds back up. Very important to go back to your turning speeds. And all we're going to do is just knock the tops off. Now we're cutting with the lead tooth, and we've already established the actual thread, so all we're doing is using the lead tooth to cut and these back teeth to actually drive it forward. And if you ever want to test to make sure that you actually have a good established set of teeth, is just shut it off, put it in there, and watch your tool just slide forward. And there we go. We know we've got a good established tooth all the way around, but I know that we're still not high enough, or we're still too high, but I'm going to grab the piece and show you. So we're almost there. You can see where it almost wants to start, but it's not. So we're very, very close. So on this cut, all I'm going to do is just remove just a tiny bit of the top, and then we're going to go again. That's one thing about thread chasing, is you're never going to get it on the first try. There's always going to be little tiny micro adjustments that you're going to have to make, and you may, it may take 3 or 4 times to actually get that perfect fit, but it's well worth it in the end. Okay, here we go, one last one. This one should get us there. And we might get it. I do see a little line on my witness mark that we made. I got about a thread in there. So we just gotta loosen it up just one little bit, and we're gonna have it. Okay, so I don't need this anymore. So when I turn it back up to speed, I'm actually gonna remove this witness mark right here, because I don't want it getting in the way of when I actually try to put the final cut on my threads. And there we go. Now it's just, we're gonna put it back in the lathe this way, and we're going to establish our top, and that's it. Okay, so now we've got all the thread chasing done. Now it's time for the last and final part of making a burial urn. And that's to actually fit the top on and actually just turn this to a decorative edge. We're gonna use the tailstock. The reason I like using the tailstock is the only thing that's holding this in right now is threads. And if I come around the corner, which has happened to me in the past, just a little too aggressively, I could actually break a thread, or I could actually lock it or shift it. And that's one thing I don't want to do. We just spend a lot of time working on our threads. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it all except for this little nub, then I'm going to remove my tailstock, and I'm going to finish this piece off. One of the things about turning resin is that it actually loves being scraped. With that being said, one of the tools that I like using is carbide tip tools, and more specifically a tool that I helped design. It's the Keith Lackner Signature Series scraper. This is on an axe handle. This is a custom handle. And one of the great things about this tool is that we actually put a bevel on this. So it's not actually cutting straight. It's actually more of a shearing cut. Gives you a lot more control and a less aggressive of a cut. So in the end, you're spending less time sanding and more time just actually turning. Okay, so we're all done with our project. We now have a fully functional burial urn with a complete threaded lid and base that we threaded here on the show. In closing, I just want to talk a few minutes about materials that you can and cannot use. Not all materials will take a thread. I'm lucky enough to be experienced with resin casting, so resin takes a thread very, very well. But there's some woods that actually you cannot. But I'm going to show you a little bit of a trick to actually get around it. Here's actually the blank for my next urn that I have to do. This is a really nice, highly figured piece of big leaf maple. Now some customers, they actually don't want resin, they just want the wood, which is fine. The problem is this wood will not be able to take a thread, no matter how hard you try, because threads actually have to be chased on side grain. The second they touch end grain, it's going to crumble. So if you come across a log or anything that's figured, that's got compression curl in it, a burl, which are the most favorite things that I love turning, burls will not take a thread at all. They'll just crumble away. Softwoods is another wood that actually will not take a thread either. So if you've got like pines or any other softwoods, they won't. Exotic woods, they all seem to take a thread very, very well. They're really oily woods like coca-cola. I've got a piece of African blackwood right here. Anytime I go to the shows, if you guys have seen these are clarinet rejects. Any place you see these, buy them up. I buy these things every chance I get, whether I go to Woodcraft or I go to one of my shows. If I see somebody selling these clarinet rejects, I take them. These are absolutely perfect for finials. Another trick to do is actually, if you've got a piece of wood like this is actually going to be the top finial for this particular urn. One of the things to do is actually bore out a hole here and actually put an insert of this and glue it in, and this will actually take the female thread. That's just a little trick that a lot of us do. When we actually have requests from clients that want some really nice figured wood and they want a hand thread lid on there, we just glue in an insert. So hope everyone enjoyed, and stay tuned for more videos. Thanks.